Welcome. Good afternoon to the East Coast. Good morning to the West Coast. We have Lynn here in Pittsburgh and Patricia Lanza in Los Angeles. So first of all, I'm going to talk about the exhibition that we have. It's called the Van Gogh Effect, and it is currently on exhibition at Snap Space, at Snap Downtown. It was running through the end of May. We extended it through June 19th, especially because we wanted to accommodate this talk with Lynn and Pat, and then you have a chance to still see the exhibition for one more week after this talk. So don't miss it. We will be talking about a lot of the images that are on the exhibition, so you'll have a lot of context about it. The exhibition is absolutely beautiful, and it's worthwhile to see it. So now I'm going to do a quick introduction. So LYNN Johnson is recognized globally for her artistry in photographing the human condition, a regular contributor to National Geographic with more than 36 feature stories to her credit. Lynn is a twice recognized Pulitzer Prize Finalist, in 2017 for the gender identity story, and in 2019 for a face transplant feature. She's known for finding beauty and meaning in elusive, difficult subjects such as threatened languages, zoonotic disease, rape in the military, the centrality of water in village life, and the mysteries of the human brain. Hate Kills, which is Johnson's master's thesis as a Knight Fellow at Ohio University, probed the societal impact of hate crimes. So welcome, Lynn. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you.
Photographer and curator Patricia Lanza has traveled over 53 countries on assignment to document some of the most compelling people, nature, cultures, and stories of our time. Lanza began her career at the National Geographic Society in Washington, D.C. as a staff photo editor. Then her position evolved to full-time contract photographer for the next 8 years. Later on, as the director of exhibition for the Annenberg Space for Photography in Los Angeles from 2009 to 2017, Patricia produced and curated high-profile exhibitions and accompanying publications such as The Refugee, in 2016 in collaboration with the United Nations. With her extensive experience as a curator, editor, and photojournalist, Patricia Lanza has worked with major museums and photo venues around the world. Patricia, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. So the first thing is the Van Gogh Effect started 25 years ago. And Lynn started the project as a project from the National Geographic. So Lynn, do you mind telling us how this came about and how you revisited that project later on with Patricia? Thank you.
Okay. First of all, thank you, Patrick, for making this possible and for creating what was, I saw the exhibit in person the other day. Everybody is sort of coming out of hiding, and it was lovely to be in the space and see the reality of it and all that hard work on the walls. So thank you for all you're doing to support this.
Welcome. Thank you.
So about 25 years ago, I received an assignment from National Geographic to do a story about Van Gogh. And I was, that seems like several lifetimes ago. And I must say that at the time, I had no idea how to pursue such a project. And generally, as I started to photograph, had this thought that it would be important to, it's not possible to compete with Van Gogh on the page. So I thought, well, let's run immediately in the opposite direction. And so requested to do the story in black and white and to use this very formal frame of the square. The Hasselblad camera is what I used. And to try to make images that were out of time, that were just sort of timeless, so it would help the reader kind of suspend reality and approach what Van Gogh might have seen and experienced. So I guess we'll look at photographs in a moment, but that material, all of that work that was done over like 3, 4, 5 months, kind of sat in a drawer in the form of negatives, and until Pat suggested maybe it would be a good idea for me to consider doing an exhibit at the Leica Gallery in LA. And she and I went to visit her friend, Paris Chung, who's the director of the gallery. And we started talking about, what would be appropriate to put on these walls? And I thought, well, why not that Van Gogh work? It's just sitting around. And so, and then Paris turned to Pat and said, Pat, why don't you photograph too? So there we were. We were like in the soup together. And how was that for you, Pat?
That was scary.
Yeah.
Because I had nothing. I had not one. I haven't even thought about it. That was not even in my mind when I took Lynn to the gallery. I said, Lynn has been shooting Leica for 25, 30 years. You need to look at her work. Is so great. You need to do. And so Paris said, yeah, the Van Gogh stuff looks like it'd be a great show. And then, so I thought to myself, well, this is kind of, I hadn't really shot seriously since I had been at Annenberg for almost 10 years. Now it's been like 10 years. So to go back into doing this would be like a self-assignment that would be in conjunction with something that Lynn had done was like really daunting. Okay. So I said to Lynn, okay, I'm going to go. We're going to.
We went together. We traveled together.
We traveled together, which is very unusual for two people who are used to working alone. We're not. We don't want anybody around when we're working. It's like stay away. We're working, and we don't need to hear any noise other than just us trying to meditate on what we're going to be doing.
Right.
Making something that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So making a picture, which is not, it's not so easy making a picture that tells a story. That's a challenge. So Lynn and I decided after much reading, I got lots of books, materials. I talked to Lynn. I decided I was going to do his French experience because it was concentrated. I only had to work. I had to concentrate on one country. Okay. And also a lot of his masterpieces were done in France. So, and then I just decided I'm going to do mine in color.
And it was really interesting because of your background, by then you had 10 years experience working with exhibitions.
Right.
So when we were in the field, I could sort of feel Pat's brain working like already on the exhibition, and so I think you saw the scope of the possibilities differently, where, photography is a very immediate presence when you're photographing. And so it was helpful to have Pat's perspective and to think about the fact that this might be on the wall someday or would be on the wall someday. And it added a bit of pressure to the process.
The fact that you decided to have very different approaches to it, black and white, color, and even in the exhibition, having a sense of, a body of work from two different people who travel together, but they're still kind of separate, and each one of you tell your own story of the same story. And so that's really fascinating in this particular project, I think.
Yeah, I don't think that it happens that often, because we would get to a location, and because we had different filters in our brains and different life experiences and different ways of seeing the world, we would sort of boing apart and go our separate ways, and then kind of come back together again, have a little
It's true. We gave each other plenty of space to maybe say, it's like, I'm thinking about this, and she was thinking about, it's like, and we actually, I mean, she made me, and she helped me make better pictures. I can tell you that, because she would, at the end of the day, we would look at what we were doing, okay, and make an assessment of what was happening. And that, for me, was really, I mean, I had like a master teacher here, okay, but I realized after the first trip, I said to her, if I don't make a good picture, I'm not doing it. I'm out. I'm just letting you know at the beginning, I have to be happy with what's happening, okay, with my work. And also, and Lynn went, Lynn go, yeah, I get. And then Lynn said at the end of the first trip, she said, you're okay. It's going to be okay. It's going to be fine, So that was a reassuring for me, because, but we made 2 trips. Mm-hmm. We did. And so that I learned a lot on the second trip about what it is. In revisiting, I mean, first of all, Lynn, you made that trip, the original trip, so you had a certain data, a certain material that you already had collected. Now you're going on a second trip. Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about the planning. We know that you had special access, so you needed to kind of like really have already planned accordingly and made sure that people were granting you those special accesses. So could you just let us know about that?
Well, mostly we wandered around, so there was no special access required. The special access was to your creative interior voice, which helps us all find our way through a project. So as Pat said, we both did a great deal of research. Mine was maybe 25 years ago, which I, of course, refreshed. There's always new material about Van Gogh. So, and I had, I don't know if you want to look at photographs while we talk, but, the original material I think I made like 3 or 4 trips of 3 or 4 weeks each, and wandered through his Holland and his Dutch and Borinage and Belgium experience. And so the original work sort of puts you in those environments in a very classic way. And but we only traveled in France together. So I think because I had done the path already, and that's what Pat wanted to do. She wanted to do the path in France alone. I was kind of not bored exactly, but I felt like I had met that challenge in another lifetime, and that I wanted something else. I mean, like after 25 years, we're all so different. We grow and mature and, have had different life experiences, which impact the way you see and think and feel about reality. So I turned to, like different processes. I used a GOGH, I used the iPhone, and we both used the Q, because that was kind of one of the deals with the Leica gallery is that we would use this Q camera to produce some of the work. So in many ways, that was liberating to see reality differently.
Excellent. So maybe we can start looking at some images and you can walk us through this. All right. So here we are with Lynn and Patricia. We're going to be talking about the Van Gogh effect. So Lynn, this is your pictures. Mm-hmm. So go ahead.
So these first few images are from the original story, and that National Geographic ran about 25 years ago. And as I said, I wandered through Holland. This is from Dordrecht, which is his, an area where he was a young man and worked in a, bookstore and was trying to find his way. It's pretty clear when you read the letters, which we read. I worked with an interpreter all of this during these trips, and we would read. She would read sometime in French or sometime in Dutch, and I in English, and we just like carried his letters the entire time. And that research that Pat spoke about that is super important to do, is continuing thread in your creative experience. So those trees, those windmills, it's classic, it's symbolic. And the next image, I believe, is from his, you're always searching. I'm always searching for people who may reflect the kind of person that he spent time with. And this is a miner who had been in the mines since he was actually a child, and was reminiscent of the people that Van Gogh would have prayed for when he tried to be a preacher in that time of his life. And the next image, he did very little formal art education, maybe twice in his life. And the first time was at this Beaux-Arts Academy. And there are a couple of images from this situation. So I was just looking for those kind of timeless moments where people weren't too distinct or too clearly themselves, but it was about the environment, the atmosphere, the feeling in the room. And, because he had significant issues with women, and I find it very interesting. I didn't even have this thought until recently, that here we are, two women, Patricia Lanza and myself, and we're like on the path of this man who was tortured around this issue of women and relationships. So anyway, the human form, the female form is, I think, also really important in these photographs. The next image, and this is really interesting, I think, because this is a picture in one of his favorite restaurants, and Pat and I both photographed in this restaurant, of course, 25 years apart. So, for me, this was before the dinner craziness, and the waiter was just sitting, taking a rest. But Patricia photographed at the height of insanity during the dinner rush, completely different style.
Yeah. Did you have a chance to eat at the restaurant, both of you?
Of course.
Of course, right? That's one of my
had to eat at the restaurant. The food comes out in a minute.
Yeah.
You order, it comes maybe 5 minutes late. It comes out like as soon as you sit down, it comes. They have like, I don't know how many things, not too many things, comes out immediately. And
it's like a set menu. It's you have like steak feet, like a dessert, and a glass of wine.
It was packed. It was something. The restaurant was full.
Yeah, and you also I don't know if you saw this, Lynn, but probably the waiters who were there 25 years ago were just still there.
Still there, right. Yeah. But it was interesting because, here it was basically empty. All you could hear was a little bit of like silverware clinking and clanking and, glasses getting ready. But we were in the middle of eating, and Pat, recently Pat would like jump up and go photograph and come back and take a bite and jump up and go. You can feel that energy in her photograph, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah. We'll see her photograph later, but it's absolutely the total opposite to this image.
The restaurant was packed. Mm-hmm. So in order for me to get away from the modern, anything that was connected today, because everybody was dressed obviously in modern, I had to do something that was atmospheric without showing the reality of the modern time.
Right. Right, exactly, and you both throughout the whole project, you have achieved that you cannot have like a time stamp on any of those images. They look like they would be happening at any moment at the beginning of the century. Lynn, so this is the next image.
Yeah, so this is at the Academy as well. And again, I just was looking for situation images that were symbolic of his relationship with women, his troubled relationships. So, it's always with photography, it's always you're dealing with reality, but how do you see that reality?
Mm-hmm.
Can you make it, can you refine it, make it obscure, mysterious? I think having those, the statues kind of in the distant, in the mirror there, and that other kind of bust on the shelf. I don't know. It all just sort of came together.
It looks so realistic. I mean, you kind of like think, is this really a sculpture or is this a real person? I mean, it's right on that cusp.
Mm-hmm. And then to Provence, which, was a place, and that was the place where Pat and I spent most of the time in Paris and Provence. And long ago, as a young photographer, I was just kind of struggling with not replicating the way that he saw. And so to make things abstract and to just play with space and to just feel the place in a different way was the goal. Of course, no wires, no modernity, but to just kind of inhabit that spatial universe was what I finally understood I needed to do, with a suggestion of his subject matter. So
this is so iconic of his work, and then the fact that it's in black and white takes you like in a totally different universe, and then you revisit, the sunflowers with a new perspective, which is yours.
Yeah, and the glory of his brushstroke, which this is the antithesis of that. It's kind of spare and flat and the opposite of how he saw the world. So, and Pat and I were both in this location. Of course, the value of seeing something over time. Pat, like, you walked into this room and saw a completely different room than I saw.
That's correct. In other words, the Dominique, we met Dominique, the owner of the auberge, who actually looked at every room, he said, of famous people to figure out what he was going to do, because he had bought the auberge. Revaux and auberge where he died, and he bought the place where he had died and lived. So he said he went to the Anne Frank room, and that was the one that he decided to put nothing in, but he did end up putting some plastic on the wall. And I'll let Lynn talk about that.
Yeah, so in the original room that I saw, you can actually see the nail holes where Van Gogh used to put, pin up his wet canvases. But by the time Pat arrived, and that was one of those locations where, having been there for National Geographic, we showed up at the ticket office, thinking, I don't know, can we get in there? And the woman knew the Geographic article and called him, and he actually came over to the house to spend a little time with us, which was cool. And we got permission to go in and photograph, which they really don't allow now. So, but he had put a plexiglass barrier in front of this wall, and it completely changed the experience. And that felt pretty sad to me, actually. When I went in there originally with Meryl, the woman who was the interpreter, and an artist herself, the first thing she did, like, I was trying to be, distant and analytic and trying to figure out the space. And she just went in and she lay down on the floor. Like, this is where he died. I want to be in that space. I want to be in that energy. And I thought, whoa,
wow,
that is cool. That is a great That is immersive.
Yeah, yeah.
Of course, his life, his death, is now a created and curated story. This is a Japanese tourist who is, showing her reverence for Van Gogh and his brother Theo, who are buried here together underneath this very manicured mat of ivy, where actually, Pat, you saw a lot of people had left notes and such, and photographed that, which I think was a really interesting approach too. But I think that we would not have this sense of, coherent thought around him without his sister-in-law, who really championed his work. At the end of his life, everything was scattered, left here and there, in fields, on shelves, in back rooms, in closets. And
yeah, I mean, she brought the Theo to be buried with Van Gogh, and she knew something. I think something of the ivy is very important, because I think Van Gogh, or they loved ivy, and so she had the ivy planted, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So it was her initiative that put them together in Avers and moved them all the way. I think it was buried in the Netherlands, Theo, and he had to be moved. But they say that people actually bring ashes of their loved ones here, mm-hmm. and drop them in the grave. So you, and also I've seen a sunflower there before.
Mm-hmm.
I know that you have one of the photos that we're going to look later, mm-hmm. Pat, where there's a drawing. So do you see people like putting drawings, or was that like one instance?
We didn't see anyone putting anything there. I don't know. Maybe you saw that somebody putting the drawing there, Pat. Did you see someone place?
I didn't see anyone place anything, although I just saw the things were left.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I do love the reverence of this woman. I love that she's Japanese, because that was his fascination and his addiction, and one of many. But and so I think he identified with Japan, and they identify with him.
Mm-hmm. It's a very lively scene.
Yes, the Yellow House, which doesn't exist anymore, of course, was near the gardens, the public gardens on the Place Lamartine, and this is just a party that was going on when we were there. So it just has a beautiful spirit. And so to come back in the story narrative, to come back from that, cemetery scene, to see the life going on in the Aro, was really, kind of a beautiful way to finish this part of the story.
Yeah, so what is really amazing here is this is obviously photographed in a very modern time, and you still have a sense of vintage, mm-hmm. Especially because of the way people dress. But they don't dress from the turn of the century, but just those little items like the hats and, mm-hmm. The fact that you photograph in black and white, so there's no color that really stands out, but you really have mm-hmm. a sense of timelessness, again, in this photo, with many people being photographed in one place. That's pretty amazing.
It's also body language. Excuse me for interrupting, but it's also body language.
Yeah.
I think it shows us that the human touch, the human condition is a continuum. We are no different. And that's one of Van Gogh's greatest messages, I think, and that is, we can all be artists. He makes us feel, whether he believed that or not, he and his work make us feel like we all can be artists. And that's a marvelous gift to the world.
Wonderful. So here's some vignettes.
Yeah, just some iPhone pictures with a certain app because I could, because I was playing, Pat was playing with color and I was going in the black and white direction, but there's a little bit of color in there. And yeah, so just impressionistic kind of.
So what are those places that you are recording in this grid?
Museums, in Paris and gardens and some of the on the bottom and top also in the asylum, St. Paul's Asylum, where Pat and I spent some time. And that was the place that was, we had special access because of my having been there earlier, 25 years ago.
Yeah, and that was all planned ahead. I mean, she had someone writing in French, to the director who she knew. And it was, that's how that came about. So it was amazing that we did have almost complete access to an asylum and certain groups only a certain group in the asylum.
Yeah, and this is a big part of the story of the exhibition is we had the exhibition kind of like ending up with the what is the asylum today? And of course, Lynn and Pat, you're going to expand on that, but this is a very important part of the healing of women through painting. So we'll go through that. So this is really important.
I mean, Van Gogh, his family, he had, I think, 3 brothers and 3 sisters. And the youngest brother committed suicide in the Boer War. And of the few people in the family, and the Wilhelmine, she was in an institution, his youngest, for 38 years. So there obviously was something in the genetics about the Van Goghs because they had some history of mental issues.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a really interesting story, Lynn, that you can elaborate on.
So this young lady on the left, standing at her easel, her name is Anne, and she was quite young at the time. She happened to be on the autism spectrum. I knew nothing about autism at that point. And she was painting. I mean, the scene outside the window is exactly the scene that Van Gogh painted many times in the garden. And so when I got in touch with Dr. Boulan, who is the director still, I asked if Anne was still alive and still well. And it turned out that she is, and that is her today on the right-hand side of your screen. So she actually continues to come back to the asylum to be a part of the painting atelier that Dr. Boulan created like 26 years ago. And I just was amazing to see her again and to have time completely collapse. And I mean, she has such a beautiful face. She's not like super verbal, but she still paints and spends her summers there painting. So, and this was the introduction to what I feel the most connected to, which is that this asylum is still an asylum, but it's strictly for women now. Mm-hmm. And the women use their painting and their art to create, not as therapy, but to create a new identity, because most of them have been through very significant trauma. So they are coming out of their trauma, using the art to, shed their victim identity and create an artist identity.
The director is also very artistic, musically and art. So he really is the one that built this program, which is so important for people to express themselves, who are obviously, a lot of these people are not very verbal or have a problem with, verbal, but it's a different part of the brain, that connectivity to music and things like that. So they have a choir, it's like really, he has an amazing program, I have to say.
Yeah, I have to say that during the exhibition, when I saw people interacting in the exhibition and when they stood in front of this picture, I saw a lot of emotion coming out of the public in general. I just took my daughter, who's 20 years old, a week ago, and she literally had tears coming out of her eyes. It is really such a beautiful documentation of seeing this young woman turn into this incredibly beautiful woman 25 years later, with the same type of gentle outlook. I mean, it's very emotional. It's a beautiful testimony. So just wanted to share that a lot of people reacted to this.
Oh, thank you.
So here's the portraits of many women there.
So one of the aspects of trauma is that and for these women, that they became invisible. And I thought, well, what better way to honor them and the fact that they are battling back from their pain than to photograph them and do portraits and ask them, what do they want to put forth? So these images were taken, actually, I did another project for Geographic about women just kind of recently, and was able to go back and spend a little more time here and photograph these women at that time also. So these are just all ladies who are part of the atelier. They're dealing with mental health challenges and are using art in many forms to reemerge in life. So, and yeah, I mean, one of the last things Pat and I did was we went to the Musée d'Orsay and we walked into the room where, there were two bodies of work and nobody cared about the other one. They were all going to the work of Vincent.
I said, Lynn, there's a feeding frenzy in there with Van Gogh. Yeah. It was like unbelievable, really.
I had the same experience when I saw the Mona Lisa. First of all, I never knew that the Mona Lisa was so small.
Tiny.
In the museum, it's, and then you see that, as you said, the room is empty everywhere else besides a massive crowd in front of that miniature painting.
Yeah, I mean, the other work was Gauguin, and so, you would think somebody would be in front of those images also, but no. And then it was actually very disheartening to see people experience the work only through their iPhone. I mean, and I think that piece in the New York Times that we were talking about, where the writer did a critique of these new immersive shows that are currently the rage. You could see that lack of meditative ability to take in the work.
Very true. Very true. Yeah. Well, I see this as being kind of like an immediate testimony that you can propagate and say, I am here right now. This is what I'm experiencing right now. How cool is that?
Yeah, because the paintings are so, I mean, especially his portraits are so intense and it's like, whoa, go look at that. That like dominates the whole, I mean, it's unbelievable, really, how his work just dominates the space that was in. And I think that's what it is. You can feel, I have to tell you, you can feel his emotional life in his portraiture. And he obviously was drawn to nature for that. It was actually his healing process, I believe, because he was a big walker.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's the major challenge for you, Pat, which you took on, with all your energy, as to how to connect to his emotional life, because color is emotion, and you worked in color. And I think that was very tough.
Yeah, I wanted to try to create a new form of visual biography to tell the story of a human life, not just with images, but by experiencing and capturing a sense of place. That was really what I was after.
A perfect segue to go into your work, Pat. So here is the main street. Go ahead.
Yes, the Montmartre, and this is the street where the Le Conseil restaurant is, which is to the left. It's the red building on the left, and it was frequented by Van Gogh, as well as Picasso and Monet. So it's still there. You can still have, go have dining at the Consulate. And this is the district in Paris where he basically lived, the Montmartre. And in order for me to get a sense of the place, I was trying to eliminate as many of the people, modern day, creeping in as possible. Mm-hmm. And so I realized in France, people are out really late in the evening, usually, but not until like 2 a.m. But in the early morning, like at 5 a.m., there's nobody out. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Very rare. So people are so that. And Lynn said to me, that was part of the second trip that became the focus. It's like, okay, I know that I have to eliminate as much of the modern as possible, but also give people really a sense of the place. Fortunately, in France, things don't change very rarely. They're slow. Mm-hmm. It's been around for hundreds and hundreds of years, and people don't tear down things and put new things up. That's so right. Fortunately, it looks quite the same. Many of the places. I
love that you have that little element of energy in there. It really makes the picture come alive, because a street is a street, but then when you see the life in it, you just feel the energy,
Yeah, they're delivering things. Yeah. So I want to make it sure. I shot this with a panoramic camera. Mm-hmm. I shot mostly with a Leica Q, but I also shot with a Hasselblad X-Pan. So I shot film too. So this was a panorama. Mm-hmm. And so, I let the person be kind of a suggestion.
A suggestion, exactly. Yeah. Here is that famous picture we talked about.
Great. Yeah.
At the Chartier.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the next one is the waiter at the Bouillon Chartier, which was a restaurant during Van Gogh's time that they ate there because it was so cheap. Supposedly, you could get bouillon, a cup of bouillon for €1 or something, really, really cheap.
Well, I'm so sorry. It's still cheap today. That's what makes the reputation of this restaurant.
It's still cheap. So that's it. And I would recommend, if anyone goes to Paris, go there. 100%. It's really an experience.
And now look at the number of plates that he has. This is not just a random picture. It's always. They come up with 5-6 plates with the steak frites, and it's kind of factory. So yeah.
Pat, how was that for you to take that photograph? Because you were, you would like take a bite and then go photograph.
Well, I knew if I knew if I stayed at he was coming, there was several levels of the restaurant. So the upstairs was not too big, but it was like a balcony that people could sit on the balcony and eat. And so I knew if I stood on that stair, they were coming around that stair they were there on a regular basis with tons of food with these plates. So I knew if I stayed there and panned, I'd be able to get something so you don't have any idea of modern life. And the waiters are wearing the same outfit they probably wore for the last 100 years.
That's right.
Yeah, great.
So, yeah. So the next slide is in Arles, France. And he spent about a year in Arles and in the Yellow House. And he was very, he painted the Arlesian women. Okay, this is the costume festival. It happens the first week of July, a day. I think it's the first Sunday or something in July, and they dress in the traditional wear of the Arlesian in those times. And the women obviously had everything. It was with all the costumes are basically historical, and there must be like it's men and women, children. And they meet in the hospital where he went when he cut off his ear. They meet there and they start from there. So if you're in the hospital in a certain time in July, you can only look it up. You'll see that's where they gather before they go on the kind of a parade. Wonderful. And so I wanted to also shoot without having. Obviously, people were taking pictures too. Besides, I was shooting other people. So I saw this opportunity where people coming into the light. It was very dramatic. So I just stayed there and got the picture.
Amazing! It's almost a Dutch-like or Rembrandt-like type of lighting. It's really painterly, wonderful.
Yeah, I would. And Arles Arles was where he cut his ear off, and then he ended up, obviously going to the asylum after that in Saint-Remy, which is about an hour. Anyway, the next one is his bedroom in Arles. So anything connected to France is what I photographed. Mm-hmm. So I heard that this town in the Netherlands, Boxmeer, there's a hotel that had recreated his bedroom. Because the Van Gogh family had gotten the bed from Arles. They had his bed. And during World War II, they needed beds. So they sent the bed to Boxmeer, the Netherlands. And there is a historical picture of people at the train station with a lot of beds. So that is actually did happen. So you could go to the Hotel Riche in Boxmeer. You can rent this room and stay there.
Oh, wow.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And they just said, here's the key. Go, do whatever you want to do up there, whatever, photographed it. They were really nice. It was really, and that's the story of the bed. They don't know where the bed is. No one knows what happened to the bed in the end. It could be still in Boxmeer in somebody's garage or attic, who knows, or it could have just disappeared.
Could be firewood.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Because people were desperate then. I mean, it was after the war and no one had, people didn't have anything. And actually, having the archival images and photographs in the hallway outside of this room made it much more interesting, I thought.
Yes. I took pictures of those too, the archival images, and so they had the history of the bed.
Yeah.
So, that's that room. And
so for anybody who is looking at this picture, I just want to point out one little thing is a special apparition from Pat herself in the mirror. And you can see that she dressed the parts to look really vintage to go along with that room. And you see her little reflection in there. So that's Pat in there.
It's like, where's Waldo? Now we're going to the Van Gogh. Back at Arles, and this is the Van Gogh Bridge in a canal, and it was a big walker. So he walked. I mean, he would walk 20 miles. He was just amazing walker. This isn't that far from Arles. You just cross a big bridge. And you go, it takes you about 15, 20 minutes to get to the bridge at the end of, it doesn't work. There's nothing happening on this canal right now. I don't think I think they just keep the bridge up. But anyway, that was also shot with a Hasselblad panoramic camera.
Beautiful picture.
So Pat, why did you have a number of really beautiful photographs that are this strong horizontal. Why did you choose that way of seeing?
Okay, I wanted to have a sense of the landscape because he was very affected by nature, by the land. He was always looked in the land. I mean, he had a hard time connecting with people.
Mm.
I mean, he never was married. He would never have, he had these early relationships with some women, but it was really difficult for him. He was just one of the type of person, I think it's kind of like, it was like an Einstein. They have a very hard connecting with socially. They're kind of socially inept in a way. But he connected with nature. That gave him his solitude and his peace, probably to make it that far as he did make it. As far as, so I think that was essential. The emotional, his emotional life was very soothed, by the land, the majesty of nature, the sunflower.
Mm-hmm.
Made him happy, obviously. So I think that's an important thing that I wanted to show in my images, the emotional connection, the nature, and just to feel the kind of what it was like.
Yeah, as Lynn says, that very, very horizontal landscape gives it like its perspective and strength. It's beautiful. Here's the Abbey of Montmajour.
Yeah, Montmajour. Montmajour is about 20 miles from, it's not close. And he walked, took me to get there on the bus about 20 minutes. So, or 30 minutes. So this was at the end of the day. Okay. And this was a little chapel there that's connected to a bigger monastery. The monastery is no longer a monastery. It's like they have a museum thing in there. They have exhibitions, and you can just see that the monastery with there's nothing but the building, which is still a beautiful structure. Okay, and overlooking the valley. So I think it was the end of the day. This is interesting. I took the bus and I didn't push the button. So I didn't get dropped off immediately. They never stop. If you don't push the button, they won't stop. I got dropped off like 3 stops later and turned around and came back. But by the time I came back, the Abbey was closing in like 10 minutes. So I realized, what, sometimes when you think there's a mistake, it's actually fortunate. And the best picture was actually really the little chapel with the birds flying out.
Right. And there's almost no windows that you can see there.
No.
There's that structure that's very, condensed.
Yeah. So that's actually what I think gave me a better photo. I got pictures of the Abbey, but I went back again. But this, for some reason, was the one that kind of spoke of the emotional kind of feeling of the Abbey.
And here we have the view that Lynn was talking about from outside of the window of Anne.
Yes.
That's the exact view, right?
This is pretty much the exact view. The room that Lynn was able to shoot in 25 years ago is now the store, part of the store, I think. And so they've moved his physical room over to another place that still has a view of the garden. So this is pretty much the view. This is what he saw. Those are lavender bushes in the wall, inside the wall area. Those would be lavender. But for me, I shot at the daytime and I shot in this. This is really, it's almost completely dark now. If I didn't have the digital camera, I wouldn't have been able to make this picture because it was almost dark night. So I think, and that also gave it the mood that I was looking for, because obviously, this gave me kind of an evocative picture. That's what I was looking for.
Absolutely. That little glimpse of light, the glimpse of light in the background is so painterly.
Yeah, lights are just coming on. So this is the next is the almond tree. Okay, now Martin Bailey of the Art newspaper is always on the search for things about Van Gogh. So Martin Bailey said he went to Saint-Remy. This is where the asylum is. That's where and he said in Saint-Remy, the almond tree that Van Gogh painted, almond blossoms, still exists, because almond trees live to be over 100 years old. So he says, I'm not going to, he took a picture of like a branch, really. You couldn't tell from his picture. He just, that was it. So I went through every backyard looking for the trees. I went through I was on the search. I said, I'm going to find that almond tree. And so I have to tell you, I found like this little grove of like these really twisted, ain't really old. I'm thinking these are like sculptures. And they're so old, they're obviously not producing many almonds, because people are keeping this going. Somebody owns this little grove. Okay. So I took the picture of the almond, a couple almond, this one, which was the most sculptural in a way. And there was another one too. And I showed it to the director of the asylum. I said, is this possibly the trees? He said, well, let me tell you, from where you took it, he was limited to the number of hours he could be out every day from the asylum. And he had to be back. So the other grove that may be older is way far away. So you're probably yes.
That's incredible.
So I got a an approval that this is most probably the little grove and from where it is, I can't talk about that, because then people would be, I'm just saying it's just within his walk, it could walking distance or a couple hours from where, whatever. So, that was that. And also he painted Van Gogh painted that picture for his nephew, the birth of his nephew. Theo had a son, and they named him Vincent, and he painted that picture for him. So that's the almond tree.
It looks so knotted, almost tortured. It's really a fascinating tree.
Yeah, and he painted the irises the first day, supposedly, when he was in the asylum. It was the most famous picture, because they have irises now in the garden.
Mm-hmm.
So
this is a picture, Pat, that a lot of people have really looked into, and what is fascinating is that if you disregard the bottom part of the image and just look at the top, it really looks like a painting of Van Gogh himself, like that movement. It's almost like a Starry Night type of.
Yeah, we're wandering. Lynn and I were wandering around the town, and this guy comes out of something that looks like a cave, really.
Oh,
and
that's right.
You remember? Yeah. And Lynn,
go ahead. Sorry.
Lynn starts talking to him, and he speaks perfect English, and he had lived in Hollywood or something, in California. And he said, we don't want to talk too much about it because we don't want to tell people where exactly this is. But he said, I'm near the farm or whatever, supposedly, where he could have been shot. That's all he said. So that's all I can say about that. But it overlooked, the people have been on this farm for 500 years. So that's supposedly a possible place where he could have been shot.
Lynn, you wanted to say something about?
Yeah, go ahead, Lynn.
Oh, I was, just thinking about how chance or fate or whatever is such a powerful part of photography. And, we did a lot of walking. And I think it was marvelous because we live in this car culture here in this country, but it's a walking culture there. And we spent hours walking around this village. And so you can really take it in. And, I just saw this guy like digging around in a yard, and there was a Mary statue or something. It looked like it had been some kind of ritual space or Catholic space. And I was like, Pat, look at this. What's going on in there? And we did that a lot. We just sort of got curious about little corners of this and that. And this man believes that, that Van Gogh did not kill himself, but he believes the story about the two young men from Paris who actually shot him.
Yeah, there's like,
or because they were bullying him, or
there's two factions. Even you go to Avers, the town where he died. There's two factions. He killed himself, or somebody killed him. There's this two factions, and they're still deliberating this whole thing. Yeah.
But the place where he supposedly killed himself was at the gate of that estate, and it was miles away.
Yeah, I don't think he did it there.
I mean, like with a gut shot, how would you walk that far? I mean, not even, it would have taken an hour easily to walk. I mean, he was a walker for sure, but, addictions, malnourished, it's hard to imagine him walking that hour or so with a bullet in his belly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Fascinating.
Yeah. So the next one is the restaurant in the Auberge Revaux, which you can go and have dine there. The food is excellent. Okay. And upstairs is where Van Gogh lived and he died. Okay. And for some reason, I took this picture. I had no idea why. I didn't. Okay. It's like, I feel like I just follow my, and I don't try to overthink these things. Okay. And so I found out later that Van Gogh had used a cloth as the tea towel. It looks exactly like this for the painting, the garden at Daubigny in 1890. And in the back of the painting is, the Van Gogh Museum has taken a photograph of the back of the painting, and it is this tea towel. So it did connect, obviously, with him, and they still have the same, they keep everything the same as with Van Gogh's there. They don't even paint, you'll see, they don't paint his room or the staircase or anything. They just try to keep it as it was. So I recommend if you go to Paris, you go to Avers if you want to make the pilgrimage and see the grave and stay and eat at the Auberge Revaux. And if you're interested in Van Gogh, and it's only about 45 minutes from Paris on the train. So
fascinating too.
So this is the staircase that leads. This is his last walk. He walked through the door down below, and he walked up these stairs and through that door. That was it, and died there. With his the therapist, the psychologist who was supposed to be helping him, but I don't understand why they didn't call a doctor to remove the bullet. But I don't know. Anyway, that is kind of haunting, really.
How did you decide to do this, Pat? Because you're not in the room.
No.
So why this perspective?
Okay, I wanted to have show a different. I didn't want to copy. I wanted to add to the story instead of trying to say, oh, here's my version of the room. I didn't want that. I wanted to show a kind of a different perspective of the place.
Mm-hmm. I love, you can see the age of it and the tonal quality and the color, even here you're using color in an interesting way, kind of dialed back and somber.
Darkness where you go into the room, it's a little bit more ominous, but it is a really nice duality with your picture, Lynn, where you are, it's stark. Your picture is stark. This is it. This is the place, there's nothing around it. This is it. And here you have more context. So it's really interesting, your different perspectives.
So this is a detail from the grave. And so, I shot this detail because it's very interesting that people leave things in his grave. And this is a little drawing, a line drawing of the sunflower painting.
Mhm.
And, so it was just, I saw a sunflower too, but I think it was a fake sunflower, not a real one. So I didn't take it. But this was kind of, for me, fascinating that someone had carried this to put there, obviously.
And again, it's so interesting to see the both of you photographing the same exact location, the same, interesting element of his life, but a totally different perspective, That is the end of our photos. And thank you so much, both of you, for walking us through this. I'm going to stop my screen sharing, and I am going to let Angela come in and see if we have. Hi, Angela. Hi. Do we have any feedback? Any questions?
Well, it's really incredible. I'm really thankful. I'm sure the audience is as well. It's really incredible to hear these stories. So. A question about, how the challenge of the storytelling. Lynn had made a comment before our meeting about how he's so well known that, how do you take on that challenge of, telling his story in maybe a little different way?
I can tell you that we each see the world differently. We do. We each experience the world a little differently. And I found that to be true when I first did my first overseas assignment with National Geographic back in 1985 in South Africa and Botswana. I went with a wildlife photographer, and we shot certain places that we were very shooting together, which is kind of unusual. But I realized we did see the world very differently. So I had to, and I'm a color shooter. I shot mostly color my whole career. So I was very comfortable with that approach. And I realized when he came to France, his color palette changed too. And his colors became brighter. And so that's why I took that avenue to tell the story and try to get an emotional tap into his emotional life through landscape, through nature, through the trees, through the places.
Lynn?
Well, I just think that the narrative, you can be very literal. And I think that's why this idea of taking the path of his life is kind of a literal way to structure a narrative. But once you're in the field, depending on who you are, your life experience, the way you see, all these other variables that, change at a moment's notice, you really, the story does sort of take you by the throat and kind of has its own way of developing. So it has its own life. And I think in some ways you end up just kind of following the breadcrumbs, meeting that man in the side lot. And, some of the things that happen on a story can be quite, challenging and also quite surprising. And the question is, are you able to take advantage of those things? And being confident in your eye and your choice, your aesthetic choices is very helpful. Like Pat, choosing color, I'm choosing black and white. We're saying this is our baseline of the way we want to see. Then the narrative is really about, you have to take in the information, you have to do your research, you have to know what happened when and where, and but leave room for those surprises, like being taken by the women at the asylum for me was the most powerful part of this project. So, and they are creating great art, actually. And I have a painting in my home, which is right there, done by a woman named Aurélie. And, so they are really fine artists in their own right. So their art actually inspired my work as well. And it became this kind of circular conversation. So
wonderful. Lynn, actually, just a quick question regarding the art that you have in your room. You were sharing with me the other day that the way the women work in the asylum is that they paint, but then they go out in the world and they sell their art in order to get supplies. Is that correct?
Yes, actually, the asylum helps them sell. And the money is split by the atelier, which helps the atelier continue to supply them with paints. And they also paint in their room, so they can have their own supplies. And, they are, just as Van Gogh wanted to be a part of commerce. I mean, he was driven by needing money, wanting prestige, wanting to be validated. And, they're no different. So they really identify with him in many ways. And so have the same challenge and frustration and sometimes success.
I think they had an exhibit with Van Gogh paintings and paintings from the asylum, didn't they? Didn't they have an exhibit?
Oh, they had an exhibit with work from an institution, maybe in New York.
They had an exhibition of the women of the asylum paintings you could also purchase when they had a show.
They have an annual fundraiser where they have the women's work in the atelier, and you can sort of buy single.
Like the asylum is almost like acting as a gallery.
Yeah, and that's exactly what they are. Yeah,
it is.
Agent.
Very nice. Very interesting. Angela, any other questions?
Yes, we have a lot more additional questions. So one for Patricia. For the room, were you able to stage things? For example, the chair or the open cupboard door? Were you given permission to stage things, or were you taking the photo exactly as it was?
You mean the room where he died?
No, the room the room in the museum.
Yeah.
Oh, in the Hotel Riche?
Yeah.
In the box mirror? Yeah, I could move things around if I had to. But I kind of left, I don't know if I moved things around very much. I don't think so. It was pretty much staged. So I didn't have to, but they just gave us the key and they go ahead, do whatever we could have moved things around and we could have moved them back, of course. But nobody was overseeing us.
And you can actually stay in that room, right? But it looks super uncomfortable.
Yeah, you can stay there.
No, thank you.
Yeah.
No, thank you.
And for Lynn, an equipment question. What did the Holga allow you to do that the Leica would not? And how did that change your approach to your image making?
Well, the Holga is, first of all, it's film, and you don't know if it worked or not. You don't know what the image looks like until you get back home to process the film. And, it's as photography used to be, which I think is a great thing because we are obsessed with, the back of the camera today and the final product. Or we're even walking away from the scene or the person that we're with. It's really a horrible kind of addiction. So you're liberated from that. And also the Holga being a plastic camera creates a very indistinct and kind of surreal, mystical image. And so you have a little help, it's like a little English on the pitch. So it's kind of, I don't know, it's just like it's collaborative. And because you cannot control it, you have to let go. And really, that's when the best frames happen, when you let go.
Great. Angela?
Yes, they're also wanting to know in what ways the two of you influenced each other, and on your journey together. What did each of you appreciate or notice as being unique about the other? And also, too, kind of as a follow-up to that, how do you think the location has been spared from being a tourist trap, or has it kind of fallen into that?
I didn't quite get that whole question. In other words, what are they asking specifically?
So the first part, we'll just kind of do that one first. How did you influence each other during this journey, and what did you appreciate or think was unique about the other as the times that you were together, or maybe when you weren't?
Because every evening we would download all the pictures. So, and so to save them, so we didn't lose anything. And we always had we always made 2 copies. So if something happened, we would have everything. And then we would talk about what, the kind, we'd look at the pictures and we would talk about them. And then, Lynn said, about the sense of time and place. Was important for me to make pictures with the modern world not creeping in, because to walk in his travels and his experiences was without that would have been a big distraction from what he had experienced. And, the wheat field with crows is still the wheat field. You go walk down this path and you're going to end up right where the wheat field is. And it hasn't really changed. It's still the wheat field now. And that's a fortunate thing for the storytelling, because really the best pictures are the ones that evoke some kind of emotional connection with, and the best paintings or art connects an emotional connection with us. That's how we tap in.
Lynn, do you have some perspective as well on how you work together?
Yeah, I think, as Pat said in the beginning, we're used to working solo. And so to have someone else there, I mean, literally, we're kind of like living in the same space and working in a similar space. I think in order to get our own space, to be creative, we came together, but we had to kind of like then, go off on our own. Mm-hmm. And I think personally, I feel like the work became a little more reactionary. Like I needed to go completely in another direction. And that's why I used the Holga and the phone. And if I saw an image like the Japanese woman praying at the cemetery, or, some of the other things that I did were really experimental with the cue that actually aren't in the exhibit at all. But that work pushed me to see things differently. And I think looking at Pat's color reinforced my belief in the black and white, because I thought I just needed more aesthetic distance from reality. So, I think I felt released from, like, there is a kind of thing that happens when you're on assignment and you're trying to do the work for a publication that has a mandate, and you have to do it in a certain way, and you hear your editor's voice in your head. There was like complete freedom here. Mm-hmm. And, but it's much more scary to have complete freedom. And so I think we both were on the edge of fear. Like I said to Pat, you have to shoot at the edge of light, Pat, but like I was shooting at the edge of fear. So let's just like let it all go and, explore the margins. And I think we helped each other do that.
Also the thing is, the the small images, the detail images for me told sometimes a bigger story. In other words, you think the big story is in the big, is in the kind of vast kind of overview, but really it's really in the details. Mm-hmm. The story is really, and telling the story through photography is always, it's challenging. That's the biggest challenge really, is telling a story through visually, through imagery. And, it's like you go to see a motion picture. It's like, it's like the story fell apart. You know what I mean? It's like, but when you're doing this photography as a single, you really can really get into it and spend, and we had time. I mean, we spent a couple months. She spent 3 or 4 months to begin with. And but this is just the shooting part, but also it's like the research, reading his letters, reading the biography, reading all of the things about him to build your idea of maybe even what your path. Mm-hmm. That was essential. The pre-production. That's essential. Okay. So you have a sense of what you may do, but you also have to leave it up to serendipity, really. Like, this happens and wow, It's amazing.
Change the road's direction and just let yourself follow where it leads.
That's right.
Yeah. Wonderful. Angela, I know that there's many more questions coming up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So with the locales that you were shooting, do you think that some of them have been spared from becoming tourist traps, or did you just have to try really hard to not show that aspect in the photos?
Oh, you mean to show something without showing it?
Yeah. Well, in a sense.
Well, for the tree picture, I had to lay on the ground. Mm-hmm. Because if I showed you the landscape, you'd find it. Right.
Well, and also too, maybe at the gravesite or some of the other locations that are a little more public, did they seem like, these really huge tourist traps, or were you able to capture moments when, like one of the moments that Lynn captured, with the Japanese woman showing her reverence? Did you have to work really hard for those because there was a lot of public, present? Did you have to work around that?
Well, there was no, like, for instance, in Boxmeer, there was nobody in that room, which was perfect because, it gave Pat time to just photograph the way she wanted. And at the gravesite, there were a few tourists, but not that many people. And so I wouldn't say that was a struggle. That wasn't the main struggle. There were other struggles, but that wasn't the main one.
Lynn, when I'm thinking about this question and also the fact that you went to the museum and you decided to take a picture of the portrait with the iPhones, this is the only picture that really is decidedly today. Because everywhere else you try to stay away from the modern world, but this one is a decision that you made. That's a really interesting decision that you made on this one.
Right. Well, there was no choice, and you're like vaulted into the reality of the. I think on the chat, Ann Tucker calls it a feeding frenzy. Or somebody did, but it's after being in the field in these quiet places and these traditional places, coming into the museum with people's completely insensitive rush to the walls with their cell phones. I mean, I was offended, and I wanted to somehow say that. So, and also because we weren't in the scene, we weren't in the life anymore. We were now, as a photographer, you're an observer at some level, but we were observing his possible reality out in the field. But here in the museum, we're observing people's behavior, and that's a different thing. So that was, important. That was a statement, and it's really kind of the.
Yeah, that's a really, the Van Gogh Museum does not let you take pictures. So you don't see those iPhones coming out in the Van Gogh Museum. You don't.
They sneak out.
And they actually said to me when they saw this picture, "Ooh, that's really interesting."
Yeah.
It was a very interesting. They go, "Whoa, look at that!" They were really, because they, I had it. I had a meeting at the Van Gogh Museum, and they saw,
That they didn't veto it or anything. They let it go. It was okay.
Yeah, to let it go. Yeah, they just let it go. It's like that's just
fascinating. It's a great photo, and it's a great statement.
It really is a great statement, I gotta say.
For sure.
It really is.
Angela, do we have more? I know we have plenty.
Yes, yeah. Some are coming through the chat too. So, with more recent exposure of his work, one of the examples we were talking about earlier is the traveling immersive experience, that's also coming to Orlando. Do you, either of you, do you foresee yourself doing more collaborative work with artists and working in different experimental mediums? And, or how does your photography and your process enhance the storytelling process for you?
Those are big questions.
For me, I think that there's a possibility. Okay. I would not, it depends on what the subject is. And nowadays I'm very interested in the self-assignment. I don't really, I'm very interested in still doing these kinds of works. And so I would, I wouldn't say no, but I would be open to the conversation with other people and to basically, do exhibitions, together. So, but that's, I want to say something. This is making an exhibition. It's like, it's a long process. This is like years in the making. It's just going to be, and it's years in the presentation too. Things move slowly for exhibitions. Usually they're presented for months at a time, and then they move to next venue if you can get more than one venue. But I think the thing is, we're so happy to work with Patrick and Snap on this. I had met Patrick like 8 years ago, I think, in Art Basel in Miami, and then that I thought of him, and he obviously was fantastic to work for, and the gallery's great. So we were very fortunate to have him take the Van Gogh show at the time, because now that the pandemic is kind of everything's getting better here. So I think that, but this is just, you have to love what you're doing. I mean, I love doing this project, and finding out more every day. It's interesting about Van Gogh, but so many new things come out about him like every year, and he's been dead over 100 years. It's like, oh, the gun, they just found the gun, or just auctioning the gun, and now the painting that they thought was lost was found, or was stolen, was they found it. There's always some information that's kind of current. It's interesting.
Or your passion, both of you, is very apparent in this exhibition. And I think that's why it is so fascinating to go through your images. And they're very, a lot of them are very serene, but they speak volume. And I think that's why we have so much interest. Angela, do you have more questions coming up?
Yes. So one of the comments that came in from Susan is that the images are really rich, evocative, gorgeous. So she was wanting to know, would you be willing to continue this narrative? And if you did, where would you go to next? Where would it take you?
It was for me?
For both of you. She didn't specify, but I think it'd be great for both of you.
You have a publisher who's interested in a book, but we obviously, we need to do a few things before that can happen. So that would probably be something that we both met with Lynn, and I met with them. He's in the Netherlands. So I think that's something that if something happens, that would be something that I would definitely be really interested in doing.
But do you think that if you do go into a publication, you would do another trip and go for more images, or do you work with the elements you already have now?
That's an interesting question. I obviously have more pictures than were shown in the exhibition.
Mm-hmm.
So that would definitely be added. Some things would be added to the book project, because that would be giving you the opportunity to get more, to have more images. I'm not sure. It just depends on what happens. It happens with the development of the publication and what that looks, what that finally, what that would be. So I think that's all dependent on that.
Do you feel like you have, both of you, are you happy with the narrative that you have created, or do you wish that you had even more to tell? I mean, you came back, you have your images. Are you satisfied with your journey?
Never satisfied.
Artists.
Like life. There's always more, there's always greater nuance. There's always, you always have to leave too soon. I think that this idea of collaborating with others is very important, especially at our level of maturity. We're not kids. We kind of have a sense of our voice, our I, what we care about in the world. And so collaborating based on that and those interests is a possibility. I feel like this issue of mental health for me is the aspect that captured my attention. Not that it was new, but in those intervening 25 years, a lot of life happened. And I spent a lot of assignment time doing projects about issues and, social justice issues and lots of other projects that helped me understand how to bring alive amorphous subject matter and the things that aren't obvious in life. So I think to continue this idea of mental health, we're all having, if you've survived intact this time of COVID, certainly we should all be more sensitive to mental health issues. And whether you're in that asylum or you're hiding in your basement, it is a factor in life. And so we need to all talk about it. And this is one of those projects that can help us do that, because we can do it within this idea of an artist who everyone knows. Mm-hmm. And in some ways that reduces the fear factor and the trepidation and encourages people to be more open and honest about their struggles. Wonderful.
Angela?
I have a question, if that would be all right, suppose.
Sure.
For both of you, I'm really curious, moving from the page or the screen, for National Geographic, to the wall in an exhibition, do you really feel like there's a lot of difference in how you approach the project, or do you really think that it's basically the same concepts, whether it's on the page or whether it's on the wall?
you want to do that, Pat, whether it's on the page or the wall?
I think that, let me put it this way. When you make an exhibition that's going to be on the wall, there's a lot of factors you have to, when you go to basically curate and hang or presentation is different. The presentation changes things. It does. So some pictures, let me put it this way, some pictures are so strong. If you hang that next to a very kind of a gentle kind of or less strong picture, you can eliminate it. I've seen it. And that's what you don't have on the page, because you have usually you have, they probably make those kind of assessments when they're about the story timeline, about the story, how the story unfolds on the page and where to put the pictures. But you have different factors when you're making an exhibition and you're making a story for a magazine. It's about placement and the power of things, the power of photography. So I think that's one of the things that, but when you're making it, when I'm developing it, I don't think about that. It's just when the final thing comes that's like at the post-production at the end, you know what I mean? How are you going to put it together? How are you going to hang it? Are you going to hang it the story timeline? Or are you going to hang it certain different ways of presentation that it can all be good?
Mm-hmm. I'm going to add to this as like curator myself, and like you are, Pat.
Right.
But I think one of the differences is when you're in a magazine, you're more telling a story, and the aesthetic of the pictures don't come into play. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter if this color and this graphic or this type of environment is next to the other one, because you're telling the story. When you're on a wall, the aesthetic of the arrangement, as you were saying, is very important. And not only are you telling a story, but you are also visually guiding a visitor, through a space that you're not doing in a magazine.
Mm-hmm. And the way you hang it can make people go fast or slow. Mm-hmm. You don't really realize it. Yeah. There's a whole aesthetic about an exhibition, about the way to present. I mean, that people, they're very, there's a certain thing. It's like if you do it a certain hanging like that, they're going to move faster. Really?
Yeah.
There's a whole practices and for museums, exhibitions and where, but I didn't think about that when I was shooting. I'm just
you experience both. You're both a photographer for editorial and a curator, so you have both perspectives. Lynn, did you want to say something about that, or?
I guess the only thing I want to say is at this point is I thought it was great to be in the gallery to see how you curated it, Patrick, because you amplified some of the intrigue in the photographs and the way we worked together or not together. And you kind of amplified the narrative a bit by the way you chose to have the images live near each other or opposing each other. And I thought that was fascinating and beautifully done.
Thank you very much. I think as a curator, there's so many different perspectives. Like obviously we had our perspective, the way we wanted to tell the story. Somebody else would have curated it differently, probably very powerfully as well. It is a different language. Every time you curate, you kind of like put your own voice into it. And that's kind of like the beauty of working in collaboration, is that you appreciate the work and you're able to put your voice into it. So thank you for the appreciation of it. Angela, do you have a few more questions?
I was all for audience questions, but I appreciate, thanks for, to the audience for participating and also to Lynn and Patricia for, really giving some incredible answers and really, really informative and enlightening responses.
So it is 3:45. We're 15 minutes before 4, and if you still want to have final words, please feel free. I think it was a wonderful time that we spent together. So, Lynn, if you wanted to say a few words, Pat, a few words, and then if there's more questions, great. Otherwise, we'll just kind of wrap it up.
Okay. Oh, just thank you. Thank you for the opportunity, and it kind of brought the experience back to life again. And hopefully, we will. I think our next place that we're going to show is Kennedy Museum at Ohio University. And then we have one more location. And so we will see what transpires there. It will be interesting to see how different that narrative is.
Exactly.
Created
very differently. So you'll have like a different perspective.
Yeah, it'll be very different, I think. And that's the way that the space, as opposed to a magazine, where you have very well-defined space and repetitive space. OU is a very different kind of space. And so the work can grow or be diminished depending on how you use that physical space. And that'll be very interesting to experiment with.
Very true.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because the exhibitions venues can also say we only have a certain space, and so we have to curate your show. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they have to curate it down. You never know. I mean, that's a possibility too. So you have to be open to hopefully working with them if they made that decision. To make sure that you're involved in that process. So I think that fortunately. SNAP was able to present our whole show, and beautifully. I saw images from the installation. So,
sorry to interrupt. We did have one final question, if you're willing to hang on.
Oh yeah, of course.
So the comment first was fascinating approaches and terrific images. But Anne was wanting to know, was there a picture that for some reason you wanted to make, but you missed getting it?
No specific image that was sort of missed because we were too late or blah, blah, blah. But, just like there are always, once you get to know people and care about them, I personally want to be in their lives in a different way, a deeper way. And the photographs will come from that experience. So who knows? Yeah. But no, not like we didn't miss some twilight moment by getting stuck in traffic or something like that. Nothing that literal. But I do think that a conversation like this keeps me, it keeps us in conversation about the project and what its potential is. Mm-hmm. And how can we be innovative in moving forward and getting people's attention, get them away from their phones into real life, into real issues, into their own art, do your own art.
I have to say, Pat and Lynn, that this exhibition was kind of perfect for the time where we are in with COVID and everything, because it's such an intimate, introspective exhibition where you just spend the time in front of each image, read the caption, understand, and as you say, spend really stay away from your phone and really interact with the photo. And I would say that the COVID was almost like a helpful element for people to come in and trickle in instead of having those crowd where everybody's drinking wine and catching up. It was really like, this is an exhibition, 5-10 people can come in, see the show. And I really witnessed that experience that people were sharing. So it was good. With that said, Angela, there's no more questions, I suppose.
No, there's not. Just
Okay.
comments and some big thank yous.
So I want to thank all of you. Of course, Lynn and Pat, thank you so much for all this inside information, for sharing your vision and this beautiful exhibition. Thank you, Angela. Thank you, Ben, for recording this talk. So we are going to produce this talk. How long is it going to be, Ben? Until we have a finished product?
Probably a week.
A week. So in a week, this will be available, and we will be able to see this talk again, and feel free to share it. And again, the exhibition is up to June 19th, so we have one more week, and it's open Monday through Saturday, 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. Don't miss it, especially if you saw this talk. Go and enjoy the pictures in person. It's really worthwhile to see it in its full display. Everyone, thank you so much. Happy Saturday. Have a great weekend. And until soon.